Hey, this is Emily Soderback of Scarecrow Video's Viva Physical Media.
Hi, this is Matt Lynch, co-host of Viva. The Projection Booth podcast is sponsored by Scarecrow.
Try out Scarecrow Video's rent-by-mail service. Choose from over 155,000 films and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs, all delivered directly to your door.
Visit scarecrowvideo.org today.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
First, there was darkness. Then came the strangers.
They come when we sleep.
Seeking a cure for their own mortality.
To steal our thoughts.
Our souls makes us different from them.
To shape our memories.
We have much to do.
To take away all that makes us human.
It is time.
Who are they? Answer me!
But one of us knows their secret.
You saw something, didn't you?
I don't think the sun even exists.
And one of us
We are running out of time. There's no escape.
has the power to stop them.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Mr. Rob St. Mary.
The only thing that makes you a guest here, pal, is cash on the barrel head.
Also joining us is Mr. Rob Spencer.
If it's less confusing, for the duration of this episode, you may refer to me as Mr. Pod.
Sci-Fi June continues with a look at 1997's Dark City. Well, it was finished in 1997, but didn't come out till 1998. Almost a victim of the Titanic, as we spoke about last week with The Postman. This is the second Alex Proyas film that we've covered this year. This one stars Rufus Sewell as John Murdoch, a man who wakes up in a cheap hotel room in a strange city with a dead prostitute in the next room. I mean, who hasn't, right? This film stars William Hurt as Detective Frank Bumstead, who's investigating the crime as he investigates Murdoch, and Murdoch is investigating the unsettling goings-on in Dark City, the titular Dark City, where daylight is just a memory and strange bald men seem to control the world. Again, who hasn't been there, right? We will be spoiling this film as we go along, so if you don't want anything ruined, please turn off the podcast, watch the film, watch the director's version of the film. Like I said, if you don't want anything ruined, watch the director's version of this film, and then come back after you have. We will still be here. So Rob St. Mary, but this is going to get confusing. Thank you, Mr. Pod. I really appreciate you volunteering that. When was the first time you saw Dark City, and what did you think?
To begin, I think it's curious that strange bald men are controlling the universe, because we have strange bald men controlling this show. Or should I say, a strange bald man, you, sir.
Very strange and very bald, yes.
Dark City, I saw the theatrical version in the theater when it came out. I think I was one of about 6 people, which included Roger Ebert, who I know we'll be talking about later, who saw that version and thought, this is good. There's something going on here. I know for me, at the time, I was 20, when it came out, so I wasn't, the huge intellect that I am today, as you know. But, being a Detroiter, I had an interest in what this director was going to do because the entryway for their American films was The Crow, which of course takes place in Detroit. Wasn't shot in Detroit, but obviously deals with Devil's Night, which we're familiar with, especially you, Mike and I, being of a certain age. Devil's Night isn't quite what it used to be back in the day, and thank God for that. But but when I saw Dark City, I was like, I really liked it. There was something in there that I really liked. I know that I saw it once, and then I don't think I saw it again until the director's cut was available. So I actually had to go back and rewatch the theatrical version and go, I understand why this issue. And the director's cut is not just an exercise in, some guy wants to add extra stuff in that he was too precious to want to cut. This is, the difference between what a film should have been on its original release and trusting the audience to get it, as opposed to what sadly New Line did with the opening, which I feel completely spoils the rest of the film. Overall, yeah, seeing it the first time, there was something there for me, and I've come back to it over the years, and it was one of those where I started to see Rufus Sewell more. Maybe he's on TV now, but I always, because of this, really enjoyed him as an actor. And then, of course, Jennifer Connelly. I mean, I'm a big fan of her stuff too. So there's a lot going on here that I really enjoy, and I'm glad to be here.
And Mr. Pod, how about yourself?
Yeah, I also saw this at the theater when it came out, and I immediately went wild for it. I was a big sci-fi geek. I suppose I still am. I like to think we grow up out of these things, but I don't think I have. And I went with a bunch of friends who were also sci-fi geeks, and I was quite outraged that they walked out of the film going, it was okay. It didn't really make much sense. Why was it all surrounded in space? How could they breathe in space? I'm like, no, it's a force field, man. This is all thought through. And it's interesting. I've seen it many, many times. And it's one of those fascinating examples of a film with real thematic depth. I mean, there are so many ways this could be read. But also, it has a very literal sci-fi narrative that actually works very, very well. And even thinking through the logical ramifications of what's in the story can kind of blow your mind. So, yeah, I think it's a brilliant film.
I did not see this in the theater. And when I saw it on probably DVD, maybe VHS the first time, I was a little underwhelmed. And I have Mr. Ebert to blame for that because he hyped this movie up so hard. It was like the second coming of Christ, and nothing was going to ever live up to what he was doing. Kind of like I still haven't seen Hoop Dreams just out of spite, because there were two films that he would just get on the stage and bang that drum over, and it was Dark City and Hoop Dreams. And I was so fucking tired of hearing this guy talk about those two movies. So yeah, I saw Dark City. I was like, yeah, it was all right. It was okay. This was okay. I definitely have grown to appreciate it a lot more over the years, especially on these more recent viewings. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can really see this now, having seen more of Proyas's work, just having seen more films in general. I mean, this movie came out, 30 years ago, 28 years ago. And yeah, it just gets better and better, especially in this late 90s wave of science fiction, where we were questioning reality a lot. I can see some people when they'd be like, well, this movie rips off The Matrix. Well, sorry, this movie came out well before The Matrix. There's elements of like the 13th Floor, even some stuff with eXistenZ. I mean, just this kind of late 90s, we're kind of losing touch on reality, Strange Days, these types of movies. Feels very Philip K. Dick to me. I mean, just the guy waking up in the bathtub, having this suitcase full of things. People probably shouldn't remember the movie Paycheck with Ben Affleck, but it's very similar to that with his whole, like, all of these little items that he has that might or may not play into what's going on. Even getting the phone call from the Kiefer Sutherland character very much reminds me of when Quaid gets the phone call from the guy outside in Total Recall. So yeah, as a Philip K. Dick fan, I really like what's going on with this movie. And yeah, the look of it is so great. This is such a beautiful looking movie. A little rough sometimes with some of the special effects from late 90s, but I really forgive it a lot. And just the cinematography overall really captures that kind of blue-green aesthetic. You saw movies like The Matrix that really had this kind of green tone to them. This one has that. It's almost like this neon, almost Fight Club type of look to it. Again, just kind of like what was in the water in the late 90s. This one really just shows off so much of that aesthetic and does it in such a great way.
I think that there's even earlier references in there too. I mean, there's Metropolis in certain shots. There's Blade Runner for me in certain ways. And of course, all of film noir. I mean, this is living in that. And then I will even go so far as to say the Stranger's design looks like the dudes from Hellraiser. I mean, there's a certain kind of Hellraiser-esque / film noir, long coats, Uncle Fester look.
It's got the horror imagery too, doesn't it? And I do wonder, I know that, didn't Alex Proyas say that the Strangers were based on a dream he had? And they do conform a lot to that sleep paralysis physical figure that people talk about wearing the hat, which is where Wes Craven got the idea of Freddy Krueger from. We were talking about Rodney Asher the other day, Mike, on my podcast. He did a film called The Nightmare about that. And it's one of these weird, globally reported phenomena of people having these sleep paralysis dreams and seeing a man in a hat. It's kind of, it's got all these pop cultural references, all these artistic references. You've even got elements of cubism and surrealism in the way that the landscape literally moves. It's willfully artificial looking, almost too perfectly dystopian from a visual point of view, but that then suits the story as well. It's a thick soup of a lot of stuff going on in this film, I think.
From a design also, I was thinking of like Frank Gehry architecture, where the buildings look like they're kind of melting and falling into each other and are distorted. Yeah, there's just so much great stuff in here. And maybe that's part of it. I mean, it's like I feel that this movie has grown with me in terms of my appreciation because I can see those layers, because I understand the references. I understand where he's pulling these things in. As you get into it and you realize that the whole thing is a construct, it's absolutely interesting that the construct is that way, because to me, someone could watch it and go, well, it's not very original. They're just borrowing from all these other places. And it's like, but that's the concept of the place, is that it borrows from all these places. And one of the things that I really like about it, is this question of what identity is. And one of the things that I remember from a kid, standpoint of going with my parents to the hardware store was the paint mixing. And I love the fact that he refers to that as paint mixing. And you see the kind of drops of things that come together to form this concept of what identity can be, which again, like I say, Mike, I do think that that's very Philip K. Dick, because that feels like Total Recall, where it's like, well, what kind of life do you want? Like, we can make you a superhero, or we can do this, or we can do that. So there's a lot of this blending of concept in terms of identity and what identity means and all of that stuff. And we can get further into that. So
there's an existential paranoia to the works of Philip K. Dick, which come right down to questioning if you are who you think you are, or has someone manipulated your life into thinking this. And that's, I think this exploration here, the Strangers remain a little bit of an enigma to us even after the reveal. We don't much know why they're in the predicament that they are in, or why they are so fascinated to explore notions of the soul through memory, but it then traverses that exact same territory as Blade Runner, where it's like, okay, do memories make us who we are? Could they be fabricated in that case? And how much does that actually change us? Or is there an underlying fabric of who we are that shines through no matter what happens to our memories? Which is really quite fascinating, I think.
I love this whole call to Lang. You mentioned Metropolis, and especially you've got that. So much of this revolves around clockworks, right? I mean, the whole thing of like at midnight, everything stops and the strangers do their thing. They manipulate. Well, Proyas said an interesting thing. He's like, they don't manipulate time. I'm like, well, they kind of do. Sorry, you had a lot of opinions on your commentary track, and a lot of them I actually disagree with. So that was one of them. Like, yeah, I feel like they do manipulate time because otherwise, how are all these people all asleep at the same time? And the only people that are aware of what's going on are the people that happen to wake up at inopportune times or that haven't been spiked with their memories like Kiefer Sutherland was trying to do to Rufus Sewell. This whole idea of the clock that controls everything. You think of that famous shot in Metropolis with the guy with the arms, trying to move the clock around at, 13 hours on the clock, very 1984, very George Orwell, even though that was before Orwell was writing 1984. Also have M with the way that the city feels so oppressive all the time. Also, I can really see Sutherland kind of doing a Peter Lorre impersonation through this, or influenced by Lorre. I love when Sutherland would do real twitchy type of performances. Like a few years before this, he was in, it's so unexpected for him to show up in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. And I thought he was wonderful in that world. Stuff like, his performance in Freeway was freaking amazing. Yeah, he can just do these great things. And then in the middle of that, you have him as like the total dickhead Marine guy from Few Good Men. It's like he could do whatever he wanted during this time. And then also the other thing that really reminded me of Lang was I just watched the Thousand Eyes of Dr. Mabuse, and then you've got Jennifer Connelly singing The Night Has 1,000 Eyes, which always reminds me of that film title. So I don't think that that's a coincidence either, because everybody is watching everything. And you've got the strangers watching everybody. This whole thing being the experiment, this whole thing of having, these spirals all over the place. And even into, if you look at the microphone that Connolly is singing into, it's got this kind of spiral pattern to it. You look at the maze that Sutherland has this rat running through as a total spiral. Also, going back to M, all of the thing about the fingerprints. And that's one of my favorite images in M, is when the detectives are trying to track down Peter Lorre, and they've got that huge fingerprint printed up or projected over the guy's head. And I just love how big the fingerprints are in this. I mean, big as in holding your hand right at the camera and seeing that his fingerprints aren't loops. They are just circles going in on each other, which also reminds me a little bit of Alfred Jarry and Pataphysics and Uber Roy, who has this huge spiral on his belly in that play. I think that all of this stuff is definitely, for lack of a better term, in play.
The strangers also remind me of the Borg in that they are collective. They're not individuals. It's kind of a cast off reference. It's a very small reference, is that they're using the bodies of the dead.
Very Plan 9 from Outer Space that way.
There's this kind of jellyfish thing when the one gets cracked, their skull gets cracked open. But I really have this idea of like insect collective or ants colony, things like that there is a kind of a central, and then I think it's, Mr. Book is sort of the main guy who's kind of the leader of the orchestra leader, makes everything go. And they have a little bit of the scene kind of reminds me of, I think it's in some of the earlier Soul films, or definitely in the Branagh remake of Frankenstein, where they have sort of that surgical theater where there's the guy who's down here and they're all in sort of this choir and they're looking down in. And so there's that kind of design. The one thing that I really love in here, and I know, Mike, that you're a fan and you might have more of a broader understanding of his acting career, but fucking Richard O'Brien in here is fucking great. Like, not knowing really who he was when I saw it when I was 20, because I don't think I'd seen Rocky Horror at that point. But like him in here, I'm just like, why the fuck didn't someone put him in more movies? I'm just like, this guy should be in other places.
He's so good. Bruce Spence in here is making my heart flutter. I always love seeing him show up and stuff. But yeah, O'Brien, especially the way that the strangers end sentences, not with a question of yes at the end, just this yes at the end. And I just love the way that he speaks, and he carries such menace.
It's great seeing Bruce Spence because it kind of whenever I see Bruce Spence, it just reminds me of Mad Max: The Road Warrior, and I think there's some similar sort of quite on the nose references going on that I think George Miller would be proud of. I think in the names, I was thinking about the names of these guys. So Mr. Book, he is like the brain of the operation, and they take these kind of quotidian objects to name themselves after, but they all have symbolic meaning. I think so you've got Mr. Book, who is the brain of the operation. You've got Mr. Hand, who is he executes the will of the collective. So he's like the hand of the king almost from Game of Thrones. And then who else? You got Mr. Wall is a guard. The little kid is Mr. Sleep, and that kid seems to be some kind of assassin or something. Seems to do a lot of the killing. So yeah, it's just really, I love this sort of simple, the way language can be used to get some of these archetypal concepts across.
Well, I love all the puns, and I think they were almost all Lem Dobbs adding those in. Things like, I'm just as in the dark as you are, things like that, for Dark City. Just there are all these little things that pepper through this, as well as, Rob, your opening was even quoting that Cash on the Barrel had these kind of 1940s, 1950s pulp noir type of phrases that they have peppering out throughout this whole thing. And, you're talking about this whole world of anachronisms, like all of this stuff is all of these different eras, like the guy who talks to him about, oh, you got to take the express train. That guy's right out of the 90s, but then everybody else seems like they're in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s even. It's all over the map, which I just love that it's this construct of this world that the strangers have put together, and they just seem to have very loose ideas of how humans work and everything, and they're just trying to figure us out. And that whole thing of the insects inside of them, I mean, that was like the literal thing in the earlier drafts of this screenplay, was that there were insects inside of these brains, and they would come out and you could just squash them. I mean, it's so Robert Heinlein's The Puppet Master, which I think Kiefer Sutherland's dad had just been in a version of that in 96. So it's like just all of these things feeding on each other. Again, I think there was the Puppet Masters and Abel Ferrara's version of the Body Snatchers were out right around this time. It's like kind of leading us into this new millennium.
The idea of facades or shells, and that the shell becomes an important word. If you think about the strangers, they're almost kind of like hermit crabs. They're sort of taking the sort of cast off physical remains of some creature, and that's what they live in, and that's what they need to get around. And if they're removed from that, they can't survive. And I think that then brings us on to this symbol, which I've been puzzling over a lot, actually. So it's never been too obvious to me, but the spiral and what that all means is clearly very important. And the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking of ways that can be interpreted either as a symbol of a never ending, something that's never ending, but actually also potentially as a symbol of the opposite. Because if you think about it, a circle is never ending, and there is a lot of circularity to this story. These cycles of change that they go through. 12 o'clock every night, the same thing happens. But a spiral is almost taking a circle and turning a spiral. In a way, is just not that different from a straight line. If you just curl it up, it's got a beginning and an end, at least that we can see. So maybe suggesting that there is a way to untangle this puzzle.
It's funny, I think about Pi and all of the spirals, the Fibonacci sequences that our main character in Aronofsky's Pi keeps talking about. There's even a shot of William Hurt when he wakes up and the cream in his coffee is going around in a spiral, and that's right out of Aronofsky's Pi, which I think was the year before. So it's so crazy how all of these things are speaking to each other within just a brief few years of time.
Yeah, there was a lot of these movies about, is everything really okay? I mean, it's interesting to look back at from 2026 and think, imagine a time when life seemed so fine that we had to dream up, there must be something wrong. There must be something wrong somewhere. We were right. It was on the way. But yeah, very 90s thing. I wonder if it's almost, if it's one of those trends you could trace back to times of prosperity, is where you get a lot of dystopian cinema. I don't know.
Spirals, I believe in ancient symbolism in certain cultures, had been related to chaos. So there's that aspect. I mean, the universe is a spiral. We live in a spiral universe. So you can use a lot of these kind of elements in that way as to why that keeps coming up. And like I say, from these questions of existentialism, I mean, there's a lot of it in here. Like I say, at the time, when I saw it the first time, I don't think I picked up on that. The thing I always used to talk about on writing on levels is that the thing that I always like is a property, an idea that does well, that you could show it basically to anyone and they could enjoy it. So, for example, like I always used to point to the Simpsons in the early years, where you could just watch the Simpsons, and if you weren't like overly literate or into certain things, that was okay. Like you could just enjoy it, and it was good, enjoyable piece. And then there were these layers of, things that they were bringing up, references, questions, whatever. And so I always the films or the books or whatever art that works best for me are those that work on these multiple layers. And then when I go back later in life and I rewatch them, I find so much in it. And at the time, I think when I was 20, when I saw this, I wasn't sitting around doing a lot of, heavy thought on, existentialism or Camus or, the absurd and things like that. But as I've gotten older, yes, like I've gotten into philosophy and all of that. And you can see a lot of that in here as well. The big question for me in my readings of Camus and existentialism is that, yes, you can say, oh, nihilists, right? It means nothing. The universe means nothing. There is no plan. But the question is what do you do in that? Like where do you find your value in the fact that there is no meaning? So that's what really life is about. It's about finding the value in something that is valueless. And like there's this paradox that you have to deal with. And I think that a lot of this in here, when you get into the deeper philosophical angles, that's what you'll find. I think if you've had enough philosophy reading, you can pull those and tease out those elements, and it's interesting in that way.
And if you follow along that continuum, so that's one reading, but then some of the same questions that come up in that sort of philosophy are also the same questions that come up if you're thinking about areas like mental illness. And I feel like this is potentially an allegory for mental illness as well. I mean, this whole thing could just be the delusion of a paranoid schizophrenic or something like that. And that's where the psychological horror of the film literally comes into it as well, is that he just does not know what is real and what isn't. It takes some of the tenets of existentialist philosophy and boils them down to a fundamental level of survival, of how you even function as an organism within a society, which is something that is mirrored by the strangers. Who are the strangers? The strangers seem to be no one, in a way. The fact that they're all gathering around conducting this massive experiment of which their survival supposedly depends, and they cannot grasp what seems to us to be so fundamentally simple that we don't even think about it. But for them, is they've got to understand it, and you just get the sense, well, they're never going to understand it. They are so far off understanding, and in a way, they don't really exist. What is the ramifications of that? What if they don't actually exist? And that can be read into the film as well.
Real quick about the spirals and everything, I'm wondering if that was also an influence on something like Westworld, the TV series, not the movie, with the whole thing of the Man in Black, the Ed Harris character, and the way he keeps finding that spiral pattern. I think he even like walks a spiral in the end of the first season. I never really made it past that, but that also brings into the whole question of what's it mean to be human? Who is human? Who isn't human? Are the humans safe when they come into this world that's populated with these automatons? And just, I mean, the whole idea of what does it mean to be human, again, goes back to Philip K. Dick so hard. And yeah, the whole idea of the memories and, Rachel having the niece's memories. One thing that I found interesting too, talking about madness, is the one character who is truly, truly mad, Valensky, who was the former detective, or he got cast in that role. And for me, so much of this movie is a metaphor for acting and filmmaking, where you're constantly casting people in these different roles and they have to just adopt and adapt these new things that are being pumped into their heads, and he's the one who sees the truth and cannot handle it. And he's the one who, kind of goes off the deep end. He's got that. I'm surprised he doesn't have a conspiracy wall, but he's got a lot of, circles and spirals in his room and everything when they go in there.
He makes up for it with a lot of chalk drawings on his ceiling. And
absolutely. Yeah. Very John Hurt and the Crystal Skull kind of thing. But the thing that he reminded me of too was the original partner of, or the original detective in Blade Runner, who we see asking Leon about, the tortoise. And there's that deleted scene where you see Deckard going in and visiting that guy. And it's like, that guy was the first detective, and it's like, we keep getting these like little hints of the first detective. And we have Valensky, who I always want to call Lee Valensky after the character from The American Astronaut, but Valensky, who's just like, I was the guy who, found this out. There have been many of us. It also reminds me a little bit of the failed Messiah character, like the Kwisatz Haderach that wasn't, like the Sting character or the Austin Butler character. Like he almost was the Kwisatz Haderach. He almost was the one, but then we have to wait for the one. And basically Rufus Sewell is the one. He's the one that will liberate us. And it's so fascinating that this was just right there, right before The Matrix comes out. And I just feel like The Matrix like solidified it just a little bit harder. But like you even look at things like the movie begins in a hotel. It begins with a phone call. You have all of these things. And I've heard people say, oh yeah, they recycled sets from this for that because they were both shot in Sydney. But I'm not sure. Heart of the City looks a little bit different than hotel. But I also like that hotel is just generic. Like the strangers aren't going to name the hotel. They're just going to call it hotel.
One of the interesting things about Walensky is it's the flip side to what I was talking about, this sort of search of reality or truth as some sort of survival need. The flip side of that and the scary thought is, well, maybe finding out the truth is the worst possible thing that can happen to you. So it certainly doesn't do him any good. He finds his own way out, which is not the way out that he was probably looking for. And I thought this was explored really well in The Matrix too, this same idea with the Joe Pantoliano character who wants to just go back to being oblivious to all this. And he's right. That's what I would want. I would like, put me back in the simulation. I don't need reality.
Yeah, let me eat steak in peace.
There has been a couple of movies recently where there's been conspiracy theory characters who you think are crazy, but actually they know the truth. And at the end, it's like, see, you should listen to the conspiracy theory people.
I know one of the ones you're talking about.
And I don't want to say which one it is because I don't want to ruin it because that's the big ending. But the thing is that Walensky knows this, he knows the truth, and then he kills himself, which to me, Camus' greatest piece is the Myth of Sisyphus. And the first line of the Myth of Sisyphus is the biggest moral question is suicide. That basically, when you know that there's nothing, that everything doesn't make any sense, you should just off yourself, right? And he's like, no, that is the cheap way out. He goes, you have to be like Sisyphus. You have to go, yes, I know I'm condemned. I know I have to roll this boulder, but I have to find my value. That is what I think Rufus Sewell's character does, is that he could very well throw himself in front of the train like Walensky and go, well, it doesn't make any, all of this is bullshit. It doesn't make any sense. There's no fucking point. But no, he has to figure out how to survive it. And in the end, use the tools that he has to build the world that he wants. And that to me is the value of what the ending is that it's up to him, it's up to us as individuals to figure out what reality means for us, what life means for us.
I love that you're bringing that up, especially Sisyphus, because sorry to go back to Dick and do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, but I mean, Mercerism, the religion that a lot of people, I don't know how to say perform, but it's almost like this virtual reality thing where you're watching this guy Mercer pushing a boulder up a fucking hill. I mean, it's totally Sisyphus. So it's great that there's that connection.
Because the Rufus Sewell character, he has to sort of get over this nightmare. I mean, how's this? Many mental illnesses manifest in a feeling that you're untethered and unable to maintain a stable sense of identity, whereas John Murdoch's nightmare is to be the only stable identity in a society of infinitely mutable ones, which I think is a nice little way to turn that in the head. It's like his problem is sentience. His problem is self-awareness that no one else has, which when you think about it, is a scary thing. And again, I mean, I don't know what it is about this storyline, but I feel like I keep imagining situations where you say, look, if this suddenly appeared tomorrow, or you were to show it to someone who'd never heard of it and said this was made last year, what meaning they might read into it. I mean, if you did it a couple of years ago, they'd probably think it was some sort of anti-vax type tirade, the idea of like the shady government trying to inject you with shit in the middle of the night. It's not good for you.
And the one man sees the truth and takes horse paste instead.
Exactly.
Yes.
Turned into this bizarre right-wing conspiratorial fantasy because it operates on these levels of, maybe because it dredges up all that. It's not Freudian, but it feels like very subconscious.
It's Jungian.
Yes.
It's so young.
It really is. And because it focuses on this idea of identity and memory and perception being an unreliable thing, which is basically the definition of madness, is when you cannot trust your own perceptions. And films which can explore that well are always like hugely effective when it sort of dawns on you how little you could be tethered to the world if you could not trust your senses.
Well, speaking of tethering, I mean, the only thing that tethers or that gives any sort of a lifeline to the Sewell character is that postcard, welcome to Shell City. For him, it's, he sees the billboard. Even when they break through the wall, they see what they think is the outside world. But again, it's that billboard until they finally do see the outside world and see the fucking void, man. It's very Nietzsche in that, as far as like looking into the abyss kind of thing, right? But this whole idea of him following this path, and again, he could be following the spiral going in and in and in, trying to find, his childhood and find that beach again. One, it reminds me a lot of Barton Fink and the whole idea of that picture on the wall and the way that he goes into the picture or lives that world at the end of Barton Fink. It also reminds me a lot of Requiem for a Dream, because how's that end with Jennifer Connelly, on the boardwalk, and just this kind of beautiful scene as well. This kind of, life was beautiful once. But for me, it's very Proyas, and it's him kind of getting back to his childhood. I mean, I think Shell Beach is basically Luna Park, and I wasn't familiar with Luna Park until we did that Australian month a few months ago, where we talked about Spirits of the Air, Gremlins of the Clouds. We also talked about Shirley Thompson Meets the Aliens, where that takes place in Luna Park, and the whole idea of her meeting the aliens in Luna Park. And it's like, okay, so it's like this decrepit kind of, place type of thing. And, it like the water and all that. I mean, the one safe space for you, if you don't like the strangers, or if you're trying to get away from the strangers, is water. Like, that's the sanctuary for Kiefer Sutherland, is in that big pool of water. When O'Brien is just walking around, he's just like, oh, you picked a very clever place. Like, we hate water. I'm like, okay, yeah. So of course you would want to go back to Luna Park.
Yeah, I clocked the Luna Park reference straight away. I do like how in the Dark City, though, because in Sydney, I haven't seen Luna Park for a long time. I went there as a kid. It was brilliant. And then it kind of went into rack and ruin slightly, but it was always painted up in bright reds and yellows, and it's a happy place. And I love in Dark City how it's this glowering dark thing with green eyes and purple light on it, and you think, that doesn't look quite so inviting. But I'm not sure if it's deliberate either. But when he creates Shell Beach at the end, what he actually creates is a sort of a headland that comes up out of the water. It looks a lot like, it's the same shape as the Woonga Peninsula that goes up into the Sydney Harbour, which has all Sydney's beautiful beaches on the seaward side of that. So yeah, I think there is quite a few references to his hometown there.
And of course you want to get back to that, it's that whole danger of nostalgia. Like, I want to get back to that place at the end. We've seen that so many times where a character is just kind of searching for their childhood and the sweet memories of childhood. When Kiefer Sutherland is creating those memories and he's smelling things, and he just seems to have that, like, oh yeah, this reminds me of this, or like, oh, I haven't smelled this in a long time. He just seems so pleasured by having that. And that's that weird scene where all of the strangers are going through the belongings, like things that they seem to have taken from the people, which that, of course, I'm thinking like Nazi Germany, and looking at like Sutherland as being like kind of a conspirator,
Collaborator.
That collaborator. Yeah, he's the one, he's very the Peter Lorre and the Lost One kind of thing. It's just like, oh yeah. What did you do during the war, Daddy? Well, I created the formula to inject into people's brains to give them new memories. I was the Dr. Mengele on staff.
Because he is the collaborator, he can also be the guy who can crack the code. So that's what allows him to show Murdoch through the injection, like, this is where you need to go. Which a funny version of this, it must have been around the same time, is in Mr. Show. There was a sketch in Mr. Show where there's a trial and Bob Odenkirk's on trial. I can't remember exactly what the sketch is. And it's like, and then there's the jury and it's like, well, could you tell us about this? And it's like, well, I could, but if you all just take the tablets that are in front of you, you'll go there. So it's kind of the same thing, this kind of bizarro idea that you can just inject someone and they will have the exact same experience as you, or you can guide them in a very particular way.
I love the way he uses smell, though, because I'm sure that's is that like a Proustian reference, like connecting smell to memory? So, of course, these things that they're injecting people with must have certain smells.
They've done studies in that in terms of memory when it comes to smell. And I know for myself, like when I was a kid in my single digit years, my parents had friends from Korea, and I would go to their house and they would make dinner, and there was a very certain scent of the food. And I remember like 20, 25 years later, because they're like long gone and I'd seen them since I was very young. I walked into this Korean restaurant and I smelled that same thing. And I was just taken back to when I was like 8 years old, So smell can have a very deep memory for us in ways.
Good calling the Proust, the Medlines and all that. And just, I'm taken back completely. The danger of finding the truth, the danger of Walensky and just, him seeing the truth and it driving him crazy. I think that's what is really scaring Bumstead, the William Hurt character, is that he starts to doodle the spirals, and just starts to see maybe a little bit more, because this is such an interesting movie too, insofar as, it has these trappings of film noir, which are primarily, a lot of them are detective stories. And here we have actually two detectives. We've got Sewell doing his investigation, and then we've got Bumstead doing his investigation. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like maybe The Big Sleep or The Maltese Falcon, where it's like, yeah, you've got the Humphrey Bogart character who's outside the law, and they constantly think like, well, did you kill your partner, Spade? And it's like, no, like, did you murder your wife here, Murdoch? No, I did not murder my wife, murder these prostitutes. No, I didn't murder these prostitutes. Maybe I'm going to find out who did, or I just want to find out what the hell's going on. And then you've got Bumstead, the William Hurt character, who's kind of investigating Murdoch, but at the same time, he's also trying to figure out what is the way to the truth. And this whole idea of like when they finally come together at the end and the two detectives join forces, that's when shit can actually get done.
There's an interesting idea to here just in terms of the literal interpretation of the story, which is that all these people, we don't know what their starting point was. We know they were taken from Earth. We don't know how long they've been out there. They could have been there potentially for generations. They could have been there for like a month. Well, probably a bit longer than that. It feels like it's been a bit longer than that, but we don't really know. We don't know who they were. And there's this idea of, does anything of who they were come in? How much of who we are is learnt or experienced, and how much is innate to us? And you get little clues, like the guy who works in the office building who says no days off for good behavior. And then when he sees him again and he's doing another job, he then uses that phrase again to sort of suggest, okay, there's still the same person in there somewhere, even though you can change all the trappings about them. So someone like Bumstead, is he any good at being a detective? I mean, he might have no aptitude for it.
Could have been a butcher. He could have been a chartered accountant the day before.
Now, they would have implanted the education and experience of being one, so he will get that, which is which is sort of the twist at the end of this, which for John Murdoch. But still, is the basic aptitude there for all these things? And it's really interesting with Jennifer Connelly's character, who is a lot more. She's quite passive in comparison to their characters. She's not really, she becomes aware because John makes her aware that something is wrong, but she is consigned to not retaining her identity that we are introduced to, that we know. She becomes someone else. But I think what I think the film does pull off is, I think the intent is that we believe that she is, in many respects, the same person. We just buy that.
Well, it's funny you bring up the line that the one person uses multiple times, even though he's recast. And then you get the line again that Rob used at the beginning, the whole cash on the barrelhead thing. That line gets used by the white guy who's working behind the desk, and then used by the black guy who's behind the desk as well. And it's just like, okay, like we made sure that this character, this crusty hotel clerk guy, is going to use that same phrase. So it's so fascinating because, yeah, I love this idea of, are we our memories? Are we ourselves? What makes us? It's fascinating listening to the writer audio commentary for this because they were obviously not recorded in the same time. Maybe they were given the same set of questions to discuss because they will both start to talk about things. And so you've got like Lem Dobbs, and he's just like, oh yeah, well, I really feel like we are, so much of us is born this way. Like if you're a killer, you're born a killer. If you're a brilliant person, you're going to be born a brilliant person. And then they, go to David S. Goyer, and he starts talking about things, and then he comes to his conclusion of, well, I feel that it's much more you're born with these things. I'm just like, this is fascinating to hear how these guys kind of repeat each other. It was almost an interesting experiment in audio commentaries and just how these two writers kind of come at things from different ways, but they end up in the same place a lot. It was also interesting to hear how many times Lem Dobbs had to talk about being raised in England, because I think he said it about 7 times within like a 10-minute span at one point. I was just like, oh my God, Lem, I got it. So I don't know if that was all because they were cut together from different places, but I was like, man, we get it. We get it that you're from England or you're born and raised in England or whatever. So like, yeah, it was funny how they both come to things like Monty Python. They both came to things like Brazil. There was a real rejection from Dobbs of Kafka and Kafka-esque, because as I'm watching this, I'm just like, well, obviously Dobbs wrote Kafka for Soderbergh, and this has such a Kafka feel to it. And I think at one point he does talk about the trial. I know Proyas talks about how the original ending of this was going to end with a trial. I'm glad they went away from that. But yeah, I definitely saw a lot of Kafka in this, and I kind of disagree with Dobbs as far as like not seeing that. This whole idea of these, and even though he brings up Brazil, which for me is very Kafka-esque, this whole idea of these forces outside of yourselves that are manipulating yourself and or manipulating you, and you have no idea who these people are, what they're doing, but you are basically just a cog in a wheel and being spun around by somebody else's power.
It was interesting that Proyas said, yeah, it's a bit like Kafka, but not as much as you might think. I think it's more like an episode of The Twilight Zone. I get where he's coming from. I think there is a lot of Kafka in it. There's a hell of a lot of Kafka in it. But I think where he's coming from is, in this case, there is the appearance of that sort of, it's not technically surrealism Kafka, is it? But it is like a surreal story. So there is the appearance of that surreality, but actually there is a very hard, cold, fully understandable reality that is explaining everything that we're seeing. Whereas something like The Trial, we'll never understand what the fuck's going on in the trial. We're in the same boat as Kay at the end of the day. It's just inexplicable. And the only thing we're probably left thinking is it's probably all just happening for no real reason. That's the complete randomness of the world. So it's definitely got a nod to a lot of this surrealist sort of art, but it has this reality to it. Internal to the story, but external to the experience of what we go through, which I think is actually what makes this such a narrative triumph, is that twist when the rug is pulled from you. It's a bit hard for us to put our minds back into the late 90s when this was a new thing, because it's been done a lot. We saw it again the year after with The Matrix, and it blew a much bigger audience's mind because they actually went and saw The Matrix. But I remember seeing The Matrix and thinking, hang on, this is Dark City when it happened. But it's such a cool twist. It is such a cool twist. And he keeps doubling down all the time on all the kind of scientific reality of what you're seeing. There is an explanation for everything here, which seems incredibly audacious because it's, like I said, it's a thick stew of weird stuff going on that feels very internal, feels very psychological, but actually it's all external.
I was just thinking in terms of roles. And, Mike, you had talked about, well, it kind of reminds me of, film or, like actors got to play different roles. I was just thinking of just roles in general. Like all of us, you, me, everyone else, we all end up playing certain roles. Like, what does it mean to be son or father or employee or, all of these roles, we play a multitude of different roles every day. They're all variants of us, but they're tweaked very differently. So, for example, the way I'm talking with you on this show, I probably don't talk like this at work, to my boss. So there's a different way in which we have to navigate the world, and what do those roles mean, and where do they come from? And I think that has also been one of the reads on The Matrix recently, and especially when people look at The Matrix now through the lens of obviously trans, creators, and they go, it's a trans story. It's about roles. It's about, having the scales fall from your eyes and then being given a gift to reimagine yourself. And I think in a lot of ways there is that in here as well, because I don't believe that the John Murdoch who's on the pier at the end with who used to be Emma and is now Anna will be the same John Murdoch that we first met in the bathtub. That he understands now, we understand, I think, that he can make it what he wants to make it. And I don't mean in the way that the strangers can manipulate things and stuff like that. I mean from the standpoint of, I have to appear and live this. I have to figure out how to make this work, because this is what I have to work with. This is, the cards I've been dealt. And so I think in a lot of ways, that's what it speaks to me on in its terms of its value as a piece of art.
The visual hook we get there is that it suddenly becomes a very sunny film at the end without ever looking like realism. It's not real sun, but it looks like a simulated sun to us, but in the story, it's a blinding real sun. And I think one of a big point of difference, I think, between the narrative here and the narrative in The Matrix, when you put all the aesthetic trappings to one side, is that The Matrix is very much a narrative about an entire population or culture of people being liberated from from a simulation, and then being able to then take back their self-determination, their autonomy. Whereas this is not so much. In a way, all that's happening is that John is just going to perpetuate the delusion for everyone. But the idea is, at least you have, hopefully, a more benevolent dictator at this point than you did under the strangers, which I think is an interesting difference.
Yeah, it's funny that Sewell would go on to play, I can't remember what role he was in Man in the High Tower, another Philip K. Dick thing, but that whole idea of that are in charge and doing this. And when you think, too, of The Matrix as being the Christ allegory, I mean, John and Richard O'Brien, as he's getting the memories put into his head, they're both basically crucified in this big machine. So, and that comes up even clearer in some of the production sketches where it just looks like such a crucifixion where the legs are more together than spread apart. But yeah, I love, by the way, going back to Emma and Anna, these palindromic names that they have, and just, very smart naming, very, very smart film and very well written. And I like that you were saying the whole idea of, it's Kafka, but it's really more Twilight Zone. I went back and I watched Where Is Everybody this morning, I guess it's the pilot episode. I never had seen the one with Desi Arnaz introduces things at the beginning, since it was all, their company that was putting this out, to him and Lucille Ball's. But then having this intro with Serling where he's walking through like, gentlemen, I think you'll enjoy this show. We are going into this and that and the other thing, and we have all of these stories. I'm just like, it was the pitch for the people at the network. It was crazy. But it reminds me of that, of course, Where Is Everybody? But it also really reminds me of one that we talked about just recently, which ironically, 2 weeks in a row, we have mentioned Theodore Sturgeon. There's a Theodore Sturgeon short story that led to an episode from 86 called A Matter of Minutes. And we talked about that on the Langoliers episode, because the Langoliers are the ones that take care of destroying the world at the end of it so it can be rebuilt the next day kind of thing. This one, A Matter of Minutes, is Alan Arkin and his wife wake up early and they actually see the world being built. Like you see Adolf Caesar as the supervisor and they're building the world for them to kind of move into every single day. Like at night, they tear everything down and the next morning they build everything up. And this is how we go. And these guys basically are the strangers. You know, they do the construction, even though with this, and again, 1997, 98, the CG a little rough compared to something like Inception. But then I'm watching, I'm just like, oh, Inception. All right. The whole idea of building the city and, you know, the mirror usage and all that. I'm like, okay, for sure. I have a feeling that, well, it was probably in an anime that Nolan saw and liked and took that. He's very Aronofsky in that way, but I was really feeling a lot of Inception when I was watching Dark City this last time.
A little dash of paprika, a little pinch of Proyas.
Yes, a little bit of Perfect Blue. I think that's the one that Aronofsky always goes back to.
Well, I was also thinking, and this one's a little further afield because I think we think of it in terms of media, but also like the Truman Show.
Oh, very much. Yeah. Or Pleasantville.
That there's one guy and like the whole world's built around him and this, and then he gets to the edge of the world and like there's a door, looks outside, you know? So there's that kind of aspect.
Well, gosh, Rob, how many years ago did we do the 13th Floor, where when you drive out of town, this whole thing of like, how do I get to Shell City and where's Avenue C? And you know, when was the last time you saw the sun? They try to drive out of town and they end up at the edge of the computer simulation. You see the ones and zeros. Basically, you see the Matrix, you know, being shown there. But yeah, I was reminded a lot of Truman Show. I was reminded a lot of Pleasantville. And again, those are both 1998 that those come out.
There's a great book that came out that I read recently. It was called, I think it's called The Best Movie Year Ever. And it's about, I think, 99. But yeah, sort of that cusp in there, you know, and like all this weird stuff and like how did this get made? Like, how did they allow such things to happen? And so it really was a great era in that sort of late 90s. I'm not trying to sound like some old man, you know, nostalgia for the old days. But there was a lot of this kind of questioning of reality. I think a lot of it had to do, to be honest, with, if you think back, because I think all three of us are old enough to remember when the internet came in. And there were all these like big promises of what like the internet was going to do. And there still is to a certain extent. But I think we were just bathed in this, you know, sort of like there will be an alternate reality and you know, you'll live on the computer. Like that concept is so old, 30 plus years old.
The metaverse. I mean, there was Second Life. I think that the internet is also where we got obviously the Mandela effect. And that's another thing where you're just like questioning your memories all the time. For me, that's always, you know, I've talked about this in a previous episode where it's just like, how self-centered are you that everything revolves around you and your memories? And just because you don't remember something the same way somebody else does, that means that, I don't know, aliens or strangers or somebody came in and changed the fucking world just because I pronounced it Berenstain instead of Berenstein.
Yeah, some of this Mandela effect stuff it's both hilarious and incredibly depressing. People going, I'm sure Portugal and Spain weren't on the same landmass 10 years ago. Like, really? I think you're just wrong.
But it's also just the malleability of memory. And this is one of the things that, you know, people who study this stuff will tell you, you're a terrible eyewitness. Like,
eyewitness testimony is very unreliable. I mean, the other thing too that I kept thinking about watching this film was all the simulation theory stuff, because I got really interested in that. I think it was a special feature on the disc release of, what's the Fassbinder film about the simulation?
Oh, World on a Wire. Yeah, which was the same source novel as the 13th Floor.
Right. Okay. And is it Nick Bostrom is the guy that was given a lot of money to sort of further his sort of simulation theory studies. I don't know how you study simulation theory. It's inherently kind of unprovable, I would have thought. But I've always found the logic of that, it just doesn't work. I just don't understand how it could ever be accepted. It just seems to ignore a very big question, because there isn't the theory, if I've got this right, that in the future there will be immensely powerful, well, humans with immensely powerful technology. That's the first thing you've got to believe.
Check. We're there. Okay.
Yeah, we're already there. They will have the ability to create simulations that are indetectable to anyone in the simulation. Okay, that's another big leap for me. Now, if you believe those two things, then if they have any interest in how their ancestors lived, they will project simulations of the past. And if that happens, there is likely to be many, many of those. And so there's only one actual past and many, many simulations. So the logic goes, we must be in a simulation. It's a vanishingly small chance that we are not in a simulation. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of ifs to get to that point, I think. But okay, you be you.
I mean, wasn't that after he had his revelation? Wasn't that very what Dick was on about for the last few years of his life?
Oh yeah, all the I can't remember what it's called, but all the sort of religious stuff. Yeah.
Well, there's also, going back to Rodney Asher, the film that he made about the kid who thought that he was in a simulation because of the Matrix and ended up killing his parents.
I mean, this is nothing new. I remember reading an account of around the time of the Great Fire of London, 1666. Everyone thought that was going to be the end of the world, the end of New Year's Eve, 1666 to 1667, I think. I think that was believed by many that was going to be the next day was Armageddon, and then, paradise was going to come and all that kind of stuff. And a number of people, to show their devotion, threw themselves from the top of churches or something at midnight. Does God need you to do that? Really?
We all know it was 2012. 2012, it was the end of the world. And then I think a lot of people pinpointed to 2016 when Prince and David Bowie both passed. And they're just like, yeah, that was it. That was the end of it.
Yeah, so there's the Christians were wrong, the Aztecs were wrong. But I mean, well, Bowie dying, I mean, that's got to be more compelling.
Shook my foundations. I don't know about the pillars of the earth.
I just think about Bill Hicks, who said, he was talking about, someone takes acid and then they think they can fly and they don't jump out a window. It's like, why not try and take off from the ground first? Even if it is a simulation, even if it is, so what? Your job still as a person here is to try and make it work for you. I mean, that's the way I look at it, is I don't get hung up on these questions, so I'm just like, I just got to make it work.
No, but Rob, if you understand it's a simulation, you can do that limbo thing and then bullets will come past you really slow and you'll be invincible. So that's why you've got to crack the code.
Just start fighting guys with very slow hand movements and everything. Yeah. I mean, even when you look at this whole thing, like where this is set, this floating city out in space, I mean, it looks so similar to the whole Iroquois creation myth, where the world is a flat disc on the back of a turtle floating around in space. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, Terry Pratchett was right.
I mean, even when it comes to like the, again, the spiral in William Hurt's coffee cup, I'm just like, well, maybe that's because this thing has to spin. And it's that whole thing of like, does the toilet flush backwards in Australia versus Michigan,
You got to be careful who you show this movie to, because it proves flat earth theory. So, I mean,
there is no horizon in this world, that's for sure. There's no sun in this world either, which I just love that becomes like the key to unlocking William Hurt is, when was the last time you saw the sun? And the way that Sewell wakes up, quote unquote, and his Uncle Carl, the benevolent Uncle Carl, is just like, oh yeah, you fell asleep during the day, son. It's like, no, that becomes a thing. I mean, I love that film noir is, some of them are perpetually dark. There is no daylight in some of these noir films, but this one actually brings that, to the fore and says, when was the last time you saw the sun? It's like, oh yeah, no, I guess you're right.
There's another thing here about disconnection from the natural order. Now, you were mentioning about the time and whether or not time really stops. Now, the really clever thing about this, I think, if I understand it correctly, is that the only way to really understand time is in relation to the natural world. It's basically about how many times you go around the sun, or the Earth spins, or whatever it is. That is our frame of reference for time. I know time exists without that stuff. It exists everywhere, but that's how you know time is passing, essentially. And the really great thing, it's like a final little revelation at the end of the film, which no one ever talks about because it just seems poetic. But I think it's actually like a cool, logical revelation is that the reason it's a dark city, the reason it's night all the time is just because this bloody thing is tilted away from the sun. That's all it is. So you just got to tilt it back around. So, but what that does, as well as suiting the kind of vampiric existence of these strangers who don't like the light, it also it enables them to manipulate your mind and time. And it still starts even getting back to this sort of notion of body and body health and mental health and all that kind of stuff, how much light you need to see. I don't even know if this is true, but, you know, the conventional wisdom is always you've got higher suicide rates in countries that have really long, dark winters or all that kind of thing. It's a very literal metaphor for just mass depression. It's a dystopia of the mind as much as anything, Dark City.
You know, Mr. Hand reacts so adversely when the sunlight hits him in the face. I'm surprised he doesn't start burning from that. But the idea, too, of running water, like not too many people think about that one when they talk about the vampire myth, but vampires hate running water. So that's a perfect place to hide out, is they're in not Luna Park, but Neptune Villa or whatever they call it here.
Well, also the darkness, like you were talking about the Jungian idea of the integration of the shadow and the shadow self and all of that. So it's like I say, there's a lot of layers in here. For me, that's why it's always been one that I like to go back to and I like to share with people. I was lucky to get to see it on the director's cut on big screen about a year or so ago. I think it's always going to be one that I'm going to enjoy. Find more things.
Matt from Viva again.
And Emily, looking for something superior to streaming? A place with more than 10 times the selection available on literally all of the streaming services combined?
Check out Scarecrow Video's Rent by Mail service. Select from an unparalleled collection of over 155,000 films and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs delivered directly to your door.
Get in on it now at scarecrowvideo.org and rediscover the wonders of physical media.
There's a couple of moments in the film that I noticed this time where some of the logic slightly falls apart, but I think there's a certain artistic flourish to it, which I think makes it okay. So, for instance, when they finally get out to where Shell Beach is supposed to be, and they find this wall with this mural painted on the wall of Shell Beach, I really love that, even though it makes no literal sense. I mean, I don't know why they would paint that there if no one's ever supposed to ever get there, but it works for us as an audience. It is a postcard. That's all it is. Basically, that's all you're seeing. But one of the funnier ones is where we have John go back to his uncle, his friendly uncle, who, by the way, is another one. It's another piece of evidence for the hypothesis that you are fundamentally someone, is that when he becomes a new person, he's still really nice because he stands up to let Anna sit down on the bus or whatever. I love that. But when he goes to his house and he finds an old scrapbook or like a sketchbook from when he was a kid, but when he opens it up, all the pages are completely blank. And then there's a scene not long after that where he's being interrogated by Bumstead. He has that book and he throws at him and says, well, why have you got all these pictures then? And it's just a moment for John to say, yeah, but there's nothing in it. But he opens it up and it's full of kids' drawings, which is sort of a neat trick until you would think, why on earth did Bumstead care about his kid's picture book that he found? Why would he take that to him and go, why have you got this kid's picture book? Wouldn't you just say, because I drew it when I was a kid? What's the problem? Are you interrogating me about that? But yeah.
Well, it's like a bad prop. You know, it's like we did the set dressing, but we forgot to put the stuff in the prop. You know, you hear about the actors where they want to have everything in the drawers, you know, because they are probably never going to open up those drawers for their desk or whatever, but they want to have the stuff in there so they feel like the world is more real. And
they can do a bit of business too with whatever's there.
Exactly. So they can, use they can start twiddling with their pen, start lighting a cigarette, those kind of things. Yeah, I love the way that certain actors prepare, where it's just like, no, I need all of these things before I can find my character.
That just brings me back to your notion about this being some sort of allegory for the filmmaking process. I do like what that then suggests about the mindset of the studios, those running the Hollywood, movie making machine, which is for the 90s works because at the beginning of the 90s, they didn't know what they were doing, did they? They were sort of casting about trying to figure out what they were going to do. And then we got the indie boom, which kind of showed the way for a while, which is why we got that sort of slight golden era, I think, at the end of the 90s, because all the indie stuff was going on. It's a bit like New Hollywood. There was a bit of creativity allowed for the filmmakers and that kind of thing. But it's interesting in this film, which suffered some meddling by the studio bosses. And of course, it's so reminiscent of something like Brazil and another filmmaker who just could not get along with his masters in the studios at all, in Terry Gilliam. But this notion that Mr. Book, the brains of the operation, does he know what he's doing? They're just doing the same thing over and over again. And what's that old adage about insanity being doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result? It's a little bit what the strangers are doing.
That's one of the things that I also wanted to talk about, Mike and Rob, is the difference between, because we've talked about all of the thematics and design, but haven't really talked about the difference between the theatrical and the director's cut so much. And maybe we can get into a few points on that, because I think those are very telling. And some of which that there's one that's kind of subtle that my girlfriend pointed out that I didn't. Obviously the opening voiceover, but the one that she pointed out was that in the theatrical version, they had a professional singer dub Jennifer Connelly, but in the director's cut, it is Jennifer Connelly singing. And she felt that Jennifer Connelly singing actually works better because it shows she's not a professional singer. She's in the role of the professional singer. And I'm like, very nice, subtle touch.
She's not a singer. Yep.
That voiceover is just so clunky. And I mean, it's
heinous. It's a heinous crime. It's a terrible piece of vandalism on the film.
Well, it just feels too like it's Kiefer Sutherland, like the way that he walks towards the audience and everything is just like, hi, I'm Kiefer Sutherland. Welcome. We've got a really special play for you. He's doing the Rod Serling thing, right? You know? But yeah, it's like, it's all of these like little differences so much, but they all add up to be so different. And yeah, I totally forgot about the Connolly thing. I felt kind of bad, like kind of going back to Connolly. I mean, I think it's Lem Dobbs. I'm not sure if it's Goyer or Dobbs, because after a while, their voice is kind of, if he wasn't talking about, being raised in England, I wasn't exactly sure who it was. But I think it's him that's bagging on Connolly pretty hard. He's just like, yeah, she's a great actress now. But I was like, whoa, hey.
Wow.
All right, great. Yeah. But yeah, she's not given, hey, Lem, you didn't really give her a whole lot to work with on this, I
always love to see her in a film. I think she's fine in the film. It's not that much of a character. The character is slightly shortchanged, I will admit. But I'm not sure naturalistic acting was big on Proyas's priority list. I think Kiefer Sutherland is great in this. It's not a naturalistic performance. It is very, very arch. It's very hammy. It's really hamming it up. It kind of draws attention to itself in a way which I think suits the film beautifully, even though he's the only character that you could not give that sort of excuse that, yeah, but he's not really that. No, he is who he is. He's the only guy who is. Who knows what he's doing. But I think Rufus Sewell is great. I think he's a really great actor. I mean, you mentioned The Man in the High Castle. I think he was terrific in that show. That's what first really impressed me with Rufus Sewell. But I think if this role had been given to someone like someone that Proyas worked with later, like say Nicolas Cage, for instance, this film probably would have done a lot better. It probably affected its chances of being, I think it just got disregarded partially because of that, which is a bit sad.
Yeah, I really like Sewell. I've seen him show up in a lot of things. I know that I just was watching the honest trailer for A Knight's Tale. He's the bad guy in that. He was in a show, I want to say it was like 2006, 2008 or something. It was called The 11th Hour. And it was one of these consulting detective, the beautiful female detective, and they're working together. I mean, we've seen that in so many times. And there was like a little period of time where it's almost like, oh, well, what's this detective's problem? Well, he's got, I don't know, schizophrenia, or he can see into the future, or whatever. It's like, he was the Mulder to somebody else's Scully. But I remember really liking it. And now I'm like on a quest to go back and try to rewatch it, just because it was an unusual series, but really left a good taste in my mouth.
Is there anything else in there in the differences between the cuts that really stands out? Because to me, I think the voiceover is really the most damaging piece. I'm trying to think of, because it doesn't seem like it was recut and shifted around. It seems like it was narrowed a bit, and then they just shoved the voiceover on the front.
Yeah, I mean, the director's cut is something like 10 or 11 minutes longer, isn't it? And I was, because I watched both in the lead up to this, but watching the director's cut, I couldn't really tell that many differences other than that opening piece with the voiceover. It was subtle enough that I just didn't notice it. And it was odd because in a way, that opening narration, it does totally spoil it. It's clearly a mistake. It's much better without it. But yet, I mean, I saw it at the cinema in the theatrical release. It was cut that way. I didn't bat an eyelid at the time, and it all still worked for me. So I guess it doesn't ruin the film, but it's such a shame when you think, yeah, that really should have been a revelation. That should have been given away in the opening moments of the film, is that there's aliens involved, because that's basically what he says.
There's a website called movie-censorship.com where it's a great site. I don't know if they still update it or not, but they will give pretty much beat by beat comparisons of things with screenshots, which is freaking fantastic. And so with that one, it's like, well, here's a little bit more dialogue. Here's an alternate, shot of John walking into the automat. Here's an alternate shot of Bumstead doing this. So they do a good job of doing that. Yeah, the impression I got from Proyas's voiceover or commentary track, and I'm glad he didn't read this commentary track. He did that for Spirits of the Air. This one felt much more natural hearing him talk. It just felt like he was extending bits here and there, which is nice. So it wasn't like, this whole scene was cut, but then he would add more to things or let things play out a little bit more so that we got a better feel for this world. Yeah, 11 minutes is a significant chunk, but it doesn't feel like it was all like, well, this scene, and this scene are the three things that make up the 11 minutes. It was more like, I add a little here, I add a little bit there, but it feels very, very carefully put together. And I want to say that he said that really wasn't even the version that they showed to test audiences, that was a slightly different version. And he's like, yeah, we'll never get that version back. But I could be wrong. I could be making that up. It could be my bad memory or an implanted memory from Mr. Hand.
Your memories are not your own, Mike. I'm sorry. I'm here to tell you.
I love, by the way, that his name is Mr. Hand, because, of course, I kept thinking of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I kept waiting for Rufus Sewell to order a pizza and,
Mr. Spicoli, you're on dangerous ground here. You're causing a major disturbance on my time.
I've been thinking about this, Mr. Hand. If I'm here and you're here, doesn't that make it our time?
There's a lot of movies that I've seen theatrical cuts, even the first time, and go, this feels like a reel's missing. Like I remember when I saw the original X-Men, the Bryan Singer one. And I'm like, God, this feels like 20 minutes is missing. And years later, yep, sure enough. And so sometimes you could tell when you see it, but as much as I would rather watch the director's cut than the theatrical doesn't feel, outside of that voiceover, it doesn't feel horrible. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like it's got big glaring fucking holes in it and shit's missing.
No, it still works, but it does. I don't know if this is just because I know it's different, but it feels to me a bit choppier. Like the editing is just a little more abrupt than it needs to be, which makes sense with what you're saying, Mike, is that he just let those scenes breathe a little more in the director's cut. Whereas clearly when it was taken off him and they did this slight hatchet job on it, they were trying to bring it in at a certain time as well. And you get a little bit of coherence in the story lost through that.
It's a real shame that the studio was just so intent on meddling, especially because, from what I understand, luckily, by the way, the Arrow disc of this is freaking fantastic. It has both versions of it. It's got extras. It's got audio commentary tracks. I think altogether, there's a guy that I work with sometimes, and he collects audio commentaries. I want to say there were 6 for this between the theatrical and like the old theatrical version and then the director's cut version. I want to say Ebert does 2 and Proyas does 2. And then there's one with the writers, and I can't remember what the other one is. But this Arrow disc is just jam packed with all this stuff. And in the making of the movie supplemental material, I want to say they took this to 3 different studios. I know it was at Disney for a while. I want to say it was at Fox for a while, and then New Line was the one that finally released it, right? And then New Line messing with this was just such an odd thing for them to do. Like, this does not feel like, the house that Freddie made.
You said there was 2 Ebert audio commentaries. Is one of them for Hoop Dreams? Just got it there.
Well, it's really weird. He starts talking about Dark City, and then he goes into this whole Hoop Dreams thing. Yeah.
There's a great book on New Line. I think I told you about that book on New Line. If you have an interest in New Line, definitely check out this book. I'll make sure to get a link to it. I'm trying to remember the name of it. That's off the top of my head. But this isn't this weird shoulder season for New Line. You have to remember, there was, in the early days, there was the Waters films, and then there was Freddie, and then it kind of lulled a bit, and then they got boosted by Lord of the Rings.
Of course, this is 3 years, only 3 years before
right.
Lord of the Rings.
So this is right before Lord of the Rings. And so this is before they go big and then bust. And so it's a really interesting thing to consider because, New Line had such... They had such a weird thing. I mean, like in this period, they were putting out a lot of like the hood comedies, weren't they? Wasn't this like they were putting out, black comedy in this time? Maverick Movies is what it's called. Maverick Movies, New Line Cinema, and the Transformation of American Film. Yeah. So it's a great book. Came out basically about a year and a half ago, and really traces the history of the company. So if you have any interest in what they were up to, that's an excellent one to look into.
So I guess it's only natural that this was on the docket to discuss, because looking at some of the other films that this was compared to and some of the ones that we've already mentioned, the only one that I haven't brought up yet was eXistenZ, and that was also 99, also just deals so much with these layers of reality. And it's just like, again, and I think we mentioned Strange Days when we were talking about Storm, the Doug Trumbull movie, and this whole idea of recording memories and all that stuff. And again, transferring, you're able to see somebody else's memories through this device. I mean, it's very, I'm sure that the Kiefer Sutherland character would absolutely love to have had a device like that. And I also love that Kiefer Sutherland's character in this is Schreber, and named after I want to say was he a psychiatrist who had schizophrenia, and he wrote an entire book about the experience of losing his mind.
I was wondering if because they pronounce it Schreber, and I kept thinking they were saying Schreber, and I'm like, what, is this some sort of like communion with Whitley Strieber talking about there's actually aliens around and no one's believing him and that kind of... I was wondering if it was a reference to that, but that might have been a stretch on
I could kind of see that. I mean, Strieber's films definitely, kind of go there and play with the mental and everything. Yeah.
With Strange Days, isn't the device they use called a squid? Which is basically what these things are, sitting inside these dead skulls, or these little squiddy things.
Or the things that try to take out the Nebuchadnezzar in The Matrix. They call those squiddies as well.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, you get a lot of that sort of imagery.
It was Memories of My Mental Illness by Daniel Paul Schreber.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, again, very, very smart naming of this stuff. And I guess that originally the drafts of these scripts went Bumstead character being more of our protagonist to the Murdoch character. So like that's, I think, having so much, well, one, it's William Hurt, and William Hurt is doing one hell of a job in this movie, and him, and then having Sewell as this kind of secondary protagonist or primary protagonist. I love that you can kind of still feel those echoes. Like we could have just turned this into the Bumstead movie, but having, him not knowing and investigating versus Murdoch not knowing other things and investigating, him knowing for sure or thinking for sure that he didn't murder these people. And this whole idea of like waking up in the morning with the dead body. and not knowing exactly what's going on. I guess another thing that just popped into my head was this whole idea of, going back to Dick again. I just can't stop talking about Dick. Use that as a sound clip. The Adjustment Bureau. I don't know if you guys remember that one. I want to say Matt Damon was in it. And it was basically, here are these people that like kind of tweak the world. So they're kind of, again, the strangers, where it's like, okay, well, we're going to adjust this over here and adjust that over there while people don't notice, and create like the new experience for people. That's very like the more benign version of the strangers. But again, once you find out that the Adjustment Bureau exists, it's like, well, now I know how the world really works. And you're one of those people who, they're the enlightened ones. And they're the ones that know that, if I get a vaccine for COVID, I'm going to get 5G.
Can we talk about, there's some like little vignettes, I think, within the film that are quite interesting. The one that I like is the couple, the very working class couples. This is one of the tuning episodes, and they're arguing. The guy's come home from the night shift. He's complaining about his work. They're living in sort of this squalid apartment. And at the end of the tuning period, they've been transformed into this very, very rich couple sitting across each other from a table that extends out and everything. And that, I just love how that's like this little microcosm of, it's like the American dream, just all sort of sped up for you. The idea that, this world, actually, you can be an overnight success from rags to riches.
I am always bothered a little bit by the actress's voice. You're talking about redubbing. It always feels like her voice was dubbed over to me for some reason. But otherwise, I love that. And I kind of almost wish we had a little bit more of the look at this person's move and look at this person's move. And instead, like you were talking about Uncle Carl, who's seen in a wheelchair in one part and then standing up for Connolly in another part, this whole idea of, if you pay attention to this movie, really pay attention to it, you start to see that it is just a few people that we keep seeing time and again, just recast in these different roles. It's kind of like, for me as a movie fan, and I'm sure for you guys as well, that whole game of character actors, where you're just like, oh, there's this guy and he played the chef in this movie, and there's this lady over here and she was the crossing guard in this other film. It's just always so nice when you see these familiar faces, and this whole movie becomes like a world of familiar faces.
Yeah, especially for any Australians watching the film, a lot of these smaller roles are played by actors who spend most of their time in Australian TV. So you always know, it's the same in The Matrix. You always know when a film is Australia pretending to be America, because there's just all these little bit parts of all these people from, Neighbours and Home and Away and stuff like that.
That's what I said when we were talking about Knowing, the one with Nick Cage, and just like seeing like Terry Calmieri show up, and I was just like, oh yeah, he was in speaking of another Australian director who's in Peter Weir's The Truman Show. So it's like, here he is in this one. And that for me was like the most Australian American movie I've ever seen in my life, just with all of those Aussie character actors showing up. It's like when Ben Mendelsohn could actually use his own accent. And it's funny here because Sewell, because I know he's British, right? And the way he is suppressing his accent, he so reminded me of like, well, not nearly as bad as Benedict Cumberbatch, but he reminded me a little of when you do that flat affect for an American accent. But I think he's great in this. And he, despite that awful hairdo that he's got, he really makes this movie happen.
What is that, a perm?
I don't know. It's like a weird, mullet perm kind of thing. But
yeah, he's just one of those people with curly hair that has decided to grow a mullet, which I think just doesn't work when you've got curly hair.
If you've learned one thing, never fight a man with a perm.
You never know what he's going to do, for a start. I was going over to a friend's place, and we decided we were going to watch Blade Runner, and I was like, we're going to watch Blade Runner, let's watch Total Recall as well. And then I popped a thing in his calendar called Dickfest, and his wife saw it and was like, what is this?
Just when my mate comes over and we hang out, like literally hang
and then
out.
You serve spotted dick. So that just adds another layer.
We haven't talked about Walensky that much. And I was just wondering, is this... Yeah, it's this idea that, I know we did talk about it, didn't we? That if you find the truth, that this somehow leads to your destruction, or that you've got to get out. But I love that scene where he does check out. It's this really beautiful little linking. Sometimes films have these scenes where you think this scene has moved the plot forward, given us a little twist, created a kind of short, sharp shock of some kind. That's exactly what this scene does, where he's meets him on a train. He's just realizing that he can't get to Shore Beach on the train. We're getting this sort of beautiful new environment, which is another thing this film does well in terms of its art design, is give us quite a varied landscape of environments to look at for something that should, in theory, be so restrictive. And just as we and John are figuring this bit out and why Walensky is the way he is, he's like, you hear the train coming, so there's like a beautiful use of sound, and he's like, I found a way out, and you're like, I know what he's going to do. And he throws himself under the train. And it's just such a perfect little way to, it's not exactly like a second act crisis to take you into the third act or something like that, but it's one of those mid-act escalations, which I just really liked. I feel like this film's got a lot of that. It's just like a little bit like blocks being fitted together to create something that then is a very solid edifice. The more you pick away at it, the more you think about it afterwards. You think, yeah, no, there's probably, yeah, I can think of a reason for that. I can think of a reason for that. It's very satisfying in that sense.
When the train comes along and there's that scene where Sewell's trying to find the express train, I was so reminded of Jacob's Ladder, which kind of fits into this as well, as far as the multiple layers of reality and the dream stuff that he has, and seeing the kind of faceless people on the train at one point. And I think with that, he wakes up on the train at some point, and might even be pretty close to the beginning of the movie. It's been a minute since I've seen it, but it also, if memory serves, he's reading Camus in that point. So yeah, I can definitely see that. And then no coincidence, I just mentioned Brainstorm, Bruce Joel Rubin, and then you've got the Jacob's Ladder, also Bruce Joel Rubin. I think him and his whole story, I'm not telling stories out of school here, his whole tale of overdosing on acid back in the 70s really, kind of helped open those doors of perception for him, and then never closed. So this whole idea of what is real, what is not, is definitely something that he played with, throughout his entire career.
The other little touch that I love, it's right at the beginning. What was supposed to be, I think, in the original director's cut, this is one thing that he changed in the new director's cut, is that for some reason, I don't quite know why, he says on the audio commentary, I just liked it. He keeps that opening segment with Kiefer Sutherland in it, just doesn't have the voiceover. But when you think about it, the rest of the film is all tightly constrained to, oh no, it's not, he says it's tightly constrained to John Murdoch's perception, but that's not true, because we've got the scenes in the bathhouse and so on with Schreber, so it is split. Anyway, but it's the scene that was originally the first scene, which is John asleep in the bath with the swinging light. I love the callback to that at the end. It's so cool because you realize why it's swinging, because we've just seen Schreber was disturbed. He got up, backed out, bumped his head on the light fitting. So this is how soon it is after that he wakes up. But also it explains why Murdoch has had this fitful ability to tune. He's not fully on top of it. He doesn't really know how to do it, but he can do it a bit. And it's because of that broken syringe thing on the floor. He only got a partial dose of the memories he needed to be able to become this master tuner. It's just a nice, again, a little jigsaw piece falling into place, I think, at the end.
The one thing I don't think works as well as it probably could have, and I don't really even think that it matters, is when Proyas on the commentary is talking about there's a scene when Bumstead is driving him and Murdoch, and they've got Schreber in the back seat. And Schreber, and I love, we're talking about spirals, like when he uses his power, it usually comes out of his mouth, and it is very spirally, the way that these waves come across. He does that to Schreber, and Schreber reaches up and grabs onto his ears in immense pain. And I always thought that it was he, is causing some sort of like sonic overload or like high-pitched noise or something that is really disturbing Schreber that we don't hear, only to find out in the audio commentary he's making his glasses kind of spiral again. His glasses go around his ears, and they like start, it's like if you pull somebody's ears kind of thing. I'm like, that doesn't really come through, and I'm glad that we don't get a close-up of the glasses going around his ears, but yeah, I was like, okay, isn't 100% successful, but it doesn't really matter because I'm so in the vibe of this movie at that point.
Yeah, I think he said he sort of just bailed out of doing it too, didn't he? He took some linking shot out of that would have made that apparent and said it just didn't matter. They just left it out.
Yeah, and it really just shows the control he has over his craft. And it just kind of makes me sad that, yeah, I enjoyed knowing, but like these first 3 films that he did with Spirits and then The Crow and then this one, it's like, oh, wow, I can't wait to see what else this guy did. And he would go back and work with Sewell again for that.
Gods of Egypt.
Thank you. And I'm just like, I'm not a big fan of this one. So I guess I need to look at some of his other films. I haven't seen Garage Days still. And I always forget that that's in that mix too.
Yeah, I can't. I saw Garage Days when it came out. I think I saw it at the 5 minutes. It must have been at a cinema somewhere. And I just remember it was very reminiscent of a time and place where I lived in a city, Sydney at the time. Very different from his other films, but I can't for the life of me remember how good it is. I'd have to revisit that one. I know it's a very sort of straightforward, real world sort of narrative for someone like Proyas, who is he really loves working in this area of sci-fi and fantasy.
I want to say I liked iRobot despite Will Smith that's in it. It's a decent detective story. It looks very, I don't know, muddy, I guess. Just the world that he creates here looks very, very clean, and it's got the nice lights and the effects that he has. And when he will bounce back and forth in time, you can tell what's happening, and just it looks like a very clean film. The use of I think more of the special effects just look very what they are, like 2010 special effects, where just everything looks kind of like, oh, I did, one or too many renders on the computer, and now it looks like garbage.
The tuning of the city and the buildings growing and swirling up around, I feel like that's held up really well. The CGI effects of the aliens, not so much, and he wisely avoids showing them too much, I think, because I think he knew it didn't look that great. But I think the cityscape does. It just opens up possibilities. I mean, this city does remind me a lot of the city in The Crow. I mean, it could almost be it might have been one of the cycles of tuning that you had these kind of characters. Likewise, I was thinking it also reminds me of Tim Burton's conceptions of Gotham City, this city. I mean, Batman Returns especially. I mean, that could have happened in this simulation.
Well, there's a part where they're going through the city in a rowboat, and I was so reminded of City of Lost Children at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which, again, like, I love the look of that. I love Ron Perlman in that. It just wasn't necessarily 100% successful for me. I've only seen it the one time, though, so maybe I need to go back and watch it. And the one person I was surprised wasn't in this movie was one of the main characters from City of Lost Children, Daniel Emilfork, who we talked about with the what was it, the Shangador, the Stranger, I can't remember what that's called, but amazing bald actor with a beautiful, ugly face.
He would have been great.
I know. After we are done talking here, I'm going to be talking about In the Name of the Rose, or The Name of the Rose, the Sean Connery film, where you just have some of the most beautifully grotesque male actors ever in that movie. I think that the director actually said, I want beautifully ugly people.
I remember seeing The Name of the Rose when I was a kid, and just like the visuals of that is just like, oh, this is a strange place where these guys are all looked up, all these bald guys killing each other. Bizarre.
All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and take a break and play a preview for next week's show right after these brief messages.
A beautiful, innocent girl on her honeymoon. Her passionate dreams of perfect romance turned into a living nightmare. For this sweetheart she married, the man she had loved, was merely the hollow shell for the invaders from outer space.
Bill!
Who would believe her? Who could help her through the flesh-crawling terror of this unearthly marriage, when anyone she turned to could be one of them? Could she touch the body of this masquerading alien who wanted to learn the secrets of human love?
Your race has no women. It can't have children. It will die out.
Eventually, we'll have children with you.
What kind of children?
All kind.
Was it true? Could space monsters mate with Earth women? See the startling answer in the shocker of them all.
That's right. We will be back next week with a look at I Married a Monster from Outer Space. Keeping it classic here. Until then, I want to thank my co-hosts, Rob and Rob. So, Rob, what are you working on these days?
As I always say, I'm enjoying my time here in the high desert. I've just been doing some writing, living the life. And, I'm going to be on, I think, maybe every month or a few more times this year. So hopefully that will continue until Mike decides he's had enough. But it's been fun.
That's it. You're out of the band.
Cash on the barrelhead. Cash on the barrelhead, son. There you go.
This day's been a long time coming. It's finally come.
And Rob, how about yourself?
Yeah, we got the podcast Caliber 9 from Outer Space is my podcast that I do with my co-host Joe. Yeah, that's going well. I think we've just posted up our episode on. We did a double feature of Stagecoach from 1939 and The Italian Connection from 1972, the Fernando de Leo film. And this week, the next one we've got coming up, we've got a couple of werewolf films. We're doing My Mom's a Werewolf. And I can't say, I've got to try to use an American accent to say that name. It's impossible to. And we've paired that up with Howling to Your Sister's a Werewolf, which should be fun. We've got Heather Drain is coming on that, who is often of this parish.
Yeah, Your Sister's a Werewolf.
Yeah.
That's what I always think of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking at the schedule, Rob. It looks like you are on every single month, maybe save for Noirvember. But otherwise, you're even on 2 in December, sir. So Rob St. Mary, big presence here at the projection booth going forward.
Overnight sensation, 15 years in the making. There you go.
And you are both here again for sure in Valhalla, our August celebration of Val Kilmer. So Rob Spencer will be talking about Kill Me Again, and Rob St. Mary will be talking about The Salton Sea. Should have interviews with the directors of both of those films. No interviews for this one. Tried my best, but was unable to get a hold of anybody, including Lem Dobbs, who, from what I understand, was raised in England.
Well, you know that much about him. What else do you need to know?
I don't know. Jury's still out.
I want some corroborating evidence. I wanted to talk about scones and tea and crumpets and clotted cream.
He's got a picture book. He's got a little colouring in book that he did when he was a kid in England.
My English Memories by Lem Dobbs.
If he does show up, he has to speak in the Cockney rhyming slang that he wrote for the Limey. So there you go.
Well, thanks again, Rob, for being on the show, and thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They are all available at waitingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projection booth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth take over the world.
They say that you're a runaround lover, though you say it isn't so. But if you put me down for another, I'll know, believe me, I'll know. 'Cause a night has 1,000 eyes, and 1,000 eyes can't help but see if you are true to me. So remember when you tell those little white lies that the night has 1,000 eyes. You say that you're at home when you phone me, and how much you really care. Though you keep telling me that you're lonely, I'll know if someone is there. 'Cause the night has 1,000 eyes, and 1,000 eyes can't help but see if you are true to me. So remember when you tell those little white lies that the night has 1,000 eyes. One of these days you're gonna be sorry, 'cause your game I'm gonna play, and you find out without really trying, each time that my kiss astray. 'Cause the night has 1,000 eyes, and 1,000 eyes will see me through, and no matter what I do, I could never disguise all my little white lies. 'Cause the night has 1,000 eyes. So remember when you tell those little white lies that the night has 1,000 eyes.
Want to support physical media and get great movies in the mail? Head over to scarecrowvideo.org and try Scarecrow Video's incredible rent-by-mail service. Right, Matt?
That's right, Emily. The largest publicly accessible collection in the world. You'll find films that are entirely unavailable elsewhere. Get what you want, when you want it, directly to your door.
Again, visit scarecrowvideo.org now and watch us on Viva Physical Media every Sunday.